Inflation.
There you go. That's $37.
It's causing massive problems to the global economy, and we now have the dreaded risks of hyperinflation and stagflation, either of which can be devastating to an economy. I'm Biko Konstantinos, and that's what we're going to talk about today. If you enjoy this topic, please give the video a like. That would really help my content get shared. And if you enjoy quality and up-to-date financial analysis on a broad range of topics, please consider subscribing to my channel. I would love to have you on board, and together we can improve our understanding of what's going on in the world. Now let's see why inflation is causing so much pain and potential risks to the global economy. In the 12 months ending February 2022, the US recorded 7.9% inflation, which has resulted in consumer prices being the highest rate that they've been in 40 years. Now, some of this is being blamed on surging energy costs related to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. However, inflation has been surging long before this invasion and was a significant issue even before all the sanctions against Russia and counter sanctions, etc. This is a funny take about what or who is to blame for inflation. However, the main thing is it's here, and it looks like it's here for a lot longer than they originally thought. So what's the impacts going to be? And what are the potential risks from this super hot inflation that we're currently dealing with? First, let's have a look at hyperinflation. According to Investopedia, hyperinflation is a term to describe rapid, excessive, and out of control general price increases in an economy. Hyperinflation is rapidly rising inflation, typically measuring more than 50% per month. As a very basic example, if the groceries you bought in March cost you $100 and those same groceries in April cost you $150, that indicates a 50% rise in the price of those goods, which could mean that the economy or the country where you live is suffering from hyperinflation. Hyperinflation can occur in times of war and economic turmoil in the underlying production economy, in conjunction with a central bank printing an excessive amount of money. Hyperinflation can cause a surge in prices for basic goods such as food and fuel as they become scarce. And while hyperinflation periods are typically rare, once they begin, they can easily spiral out of control. Another indicator that inflation is getting out of control is when the elements of a coin are worth more than the coin itself. Now that's happening now, where the nickel and the copper inside coins are actually worth more than the value of those coins. Let's have a look at some of the inflation hotspots. First, we'll consider the Eurozone Producer Price Index year over year. Now, Producer Price Index measures the average changes in prices received by domestic producers for their output. It's a leading indicator of the consumer price inflation. This Eurozone Producer Price Index chart shows the average change for prices dropped during the COVID pandemic, but has been rising since July 2020, and since mid-2021 has seen extreme price rises. So we're currently sitting on a 30% rise in PPI for the 12 months up to March 2022 in the Eurozone. These rises in prices that are received by domestic producers are very significant and will lead to higher prices for consumers. Turkey's PPI has now risen to 100% for the past 12 months. So domestic producers in Turkey are receiving double what they were 12 months ago for their products. You can see from this chart that the last 3 months has seen a surge in PPI. There are places in the world that have seen severe hyperinflation, like Venezuela. Now, Turkey is also having a bit of an economic crisis, but apart from these country anomalies that happen from time to time, we've got an entire Eurozone that is now facing extreme inflation. So adding to this already hot inflation, we've now got the Russia-Ukraine military action that has resulted in global sanctions and retaliation from Russia. And because Russia and Ukraine are very large exporters of oil, natural gas, wheat, and many other commodities, The price rises expected are going to be very large, and they're going to impact the Eurozone the hardest because they currently input so much natural gas and oil and wheat, etc. from Russia, Ukraine. So the Eurozone presently has a major risk of inflation spiraling out of control and the effects to the economy that will cause. Now, the Eurozone may never reach the levels required to technically be cast as hyperinflation. That area is definitely experiencing runaway inflation, which will have significant impact on the people and the economy of those countries. So we've discussed hyperinflation and runaway inflation, but what is stagflation and why is everyone so worried about it? According to Investopedia, stagflation refers to an economy that is experiencing a simultaneous increase in inflation and stagnation of economic output. To better understand stagflation, I'm going to look at this article from The Conversation. When the health of an economy is being assessed, economists will often consider gross domestic product, unemployment, and inflation. Under normal circumstances, there's a trade-off between these. For example, if you have strong GDP growth and low employment, you'll often have high inflation. Similarly, if you're able to keep inflation low, this can often result in lower GDP growth and possibly higher unemployment. So normally an economy might have some good news and some bad news. But with stagflation, there is no good news. You've got GDP growth stalling or even falling. You've also got high inflation, and those two combined will then often result in rising unemployment. So what can be done about the dreaded stagflation? Well, there's no easy solution. If you try and fight the higher inflation, you'll normally get lower growth. And if you try and improve the lower growth, it will most likely result in higher inflation. An example here is the interest rate rises that the Fed has signaled it'll have to make this year. This should somewhat help inflation. However, any interest rate rises does hurt economic activity and overall growth. Alternatively, if the government kept interest rates low and continued to try and stimulate the economy, it would end up fueling more inflation, which would be a disaster in itself. So in a stagflation scenario, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Damn you!
And according to this article, stagflation is a nightmare you never want to have to live through.
This is a nightmare.
So we've got a global economy that was still feeling massive after effects from the COVID pandemic, but now we've got added into the mix a Russian invasion of Ukraine, which has resulted in massive sanctions implemented against Russia and subsequent retaliation from Russia. So this nightmare scenario of stagflation could actually become a reality for the global economy. So what do you think? Do you think some countries might actually experience hyperinflation during this period? Or do you think the greatest risk to the global economy is stagflation? Or do you think we'll be able to avoid these nightmare economic scenarios? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hey, if you've watched this much of my video, you might as well subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you on board, and my commitment to you is to provide quality and up-to-date content to support all your investing goals. I'm Biko Konstantinos, and I'll catch you in my next video.